you know, different, but I have done this before. So and I'm just making sure I've got my, okay. So what we're talking about today is the power of relationships, and relationships can be super healing. And we're looking at our current society, and we're talking about pre-COVID, as well as let's put a COVID spin on this too today. So let's just go to the next slide, but hang on, I'm sorry, I'm having a technical issue here with my mouse. There it goes. So I started working on this. I started studying like what social media is doing to us and to us as a society. And so I started asking these questions. You can see them. But one of the big ones that I asked is, you know, really, what is social media doing? Why we have all these opportunities for connecting with friends? Why are we seeing an increase in loneliness, depression, anxiety? Why are more of our clients more depressed? And so when we think about this, you know, this is before COVID hit, but really we can look at COVID right now and how it's impacting us. And our kids are going back to school, a lot of them throughout the country online, or they spent the end of the year online. And we notice that there's some impact, us having just so much electronic usage and everything being this way. So I also asked the question, what would happen if everybody learned about the importance of safe connections, of healthy connections? So as I'm doing research, I'm noticing that our home sizes have increased 1,000 square feet since 1973. There's more TVs in our homes. We have more consumer debt. We have tons, 3 or more internet connected devices. We're on the computers more than 10 hours a day. And right now, even more than that, because people are working from home or going to school from home. And we're really looking at all the external ways that we can become happy, you know, substances, sex, self-harm, emotional numbing. We're trying to really find solutions that are outside of ourselves and that are stuff. So then I found that 51% of the respondents in a survey said they're checking social media sites at dinner. So we're impacting family time, right? 2 in 5 people, I'm gonna guess that's higher right now, I haven't done the COVID research, spend more time socializing online than they do face-to-face. Have you guys been to a concert where everybody's recording the concert and you can see that recording that's happening and they're all viewing this concert through their phones versus just sitting and enjoying it? They're missing important events. Instead, they're like, oh, I'm gonna get this video so I can share this on social media, I'm gonna do this. And we're so focused on like this self-promotion and branding. Do you have a number for them? Did somebody have a question?
Let me, hold on, let me look it up. I can look it up for you quick right here.
Somebody is talking, I don't know. There's a question.
No, you're good.
Okay. So the biggest thing that I found was that 62% of school-age kids were saying that their parents are too distracted when they try to talk to them, and that cell phones are the top parent distraction. So we know that parents are paying a lot of attention to their phones. We do everything on our phones. And so then we can look at like phone dependence, so signs of phone dependence. And you guys can receive this. So I put lots of information in these slides. You'll have all these slides. Michael can send it out. But just look at this list: anxiety, stress, narcissism, depression, loneliness, ADD, and sleep deprivation. These are all signs of phone usage dependence. So we want to look at those things. We want to pay attention to that. And then let's look at the social impact. I don't know how many of you have been at a party or been in a situation with a bunch of teenagers who are all communicating with one another over their phones. Anybody have been in that situation? Ned, you give me a head nod. So there's these times that kids are sitting there and they're texting each other while in the same room with one another. And there's kids that spend a lot of time in their rooms alone on their phones, and that's how they're socializing. So we're finding that people who are spending so much time on social media experience increased anxiety and decreased self-esteem. And I want to make sure that it's clear, I don't think social media is a bad thing. I think this can be an amazing tool, but we have to look at how we're using it. And that's what research is really showing us, is that we have to look at what that social media is being used for. So if you're looking at it and you're going, oh, I'm so unhappy about my lack of accomplishments or the lack of, vacations that I'm taking, then that's problematic. If you're seeing it to truly connect with people and use it as a resource, that's a different experience. So we're looking at teens who tend to be more apt to compare themselves to other people. Those who spend more time than average on screen activities are more likely to be unhappy. They're comparing themselves. And here's a crazy one, is that 1 in 5 people report that they've checked their phone during sex. It's not really going to improve their relationship. So let's move to the developmental tasks of adolescence and young adulthood. So I'm not going to read all of these. You see these 10 tasks, but let's look at number 3. We're going to develop and apply a more complex level of perspective taking. Does our social media use, does our electronic use impact that perspective taking? Does it impact our ability to develop and apply new coping skills? How does it impact us understanding and expressing more complex emotional experiences? And how does it impact our ability to form friendships that are mutually close and supportive? So we look at those things, and how is social media, how is our electronic use, how are our phone use, how is texting impacting those developmental milestones? And how, really how are these impacting us overall? And if we're looking at our domains of well-being, and social being one of them, we look at physical, emotional, intellectual, moral, and then social. Our social well-being, or our ability to connect with other people, establishing and maintaining positive relationships. What do all these things and how do they contribute? So one of the things that I suggest with therapists working, with people who are more apt to be involved in social media, or you can hear that in sessions, that they're talking a lot about that. It's really assessing, how is their connection to other people? What happens? What is their social support network like? So really looking at that. And then if we can define connection, that it's the energy that exists between two people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. So right now I'm looking at Ned, and Michael, I've got them. So I feel seen. I don't know, the rest of you guys are like blank screens. Do I feel a connection to you? So not as much, right? And so in those connections, we want, Take's joining me. So when they can give and receive without judgment. So we know that when we can get in a relationship, we know we're going to be seen, and that we're not going to be judged. We're going to be able to be validated, and we're going to gain strength from the relationship. That's going to give us this connection. And do we get all that from, social media? Do we get all that from these text things? At least on the phone, we can hear each other. And right now, when we're sitting in this situation during a pandemic, and we can't really interact with each other individually and on a face to face a lot of times, we've got to look at how we're going to do that better right now, how we're going to stay connected while being safe, right? So this other one, Brene Brown talks about, you know, this need for connection. And this is one of my favorite things that she says, is that this connection, this deep sense of love and belonging, it's irreducible need for all men, women, and children. We're biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. So when those needs aren't being met, we don't function. And so we're looking at the fact that we fall apart, we numb, we hurt each other, and we get sick. So we need to be looking at this in our clients, like, how do we find that belongingness? How do we find those connections so that we're feeling those feelings and not just numbing or lashing out at other people? So we look at like, how do we get disconnected, right? So Bruce Perry, who's one of my favorites as well, he said, mix child illiteracy with an individualistic culture. We have that, right? That promotes competition. So social media really promotes competition, who's doing it best. And then had all this electronic media that can be isolating and violent and reduces our time socializing, and we create a world where empathy is really threatened. So as we start to look at that in the people that we work with, but also in ourselves, it's really important. And then we're looking at loneliness. So we're lacking in loneliness, you know, is like the social connections aren't there. We're lacking those. And we're cut off from the people who, you know, who we belong with. That belongingness is missing. We're not close. We don't have the affection of genuine friends. So we're feeling lonely and disconnected. And we look at the dimensions of loneliness. We have intimate connection, a relational and collective. So that's that intimate is like that person, you know, having our person, that intimate bond or partner. A relational is yearning for those quality friendships, social companionship. And then collective is like that community, your overarching community. So sometimes there's people who say, I feel so lonely. And is that because, and their intimate partner is like, I'm right here. Well, maybe they're lonely in a different way. They're not feeling that community. They're not feeling that collective connection or those quality friendships. So there's a lot of different dimensions. So it's looking at and assessing that when somebody says, I feel lonely, or, you know, I'm sad. Let's look at what are the reasons for that. Is it that social connection? We know those 5 areas of health includes social. So even Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about this. You know, he talks about that love and belonging is just above our physiological and safety needs. So do we have that? Do these individuals that we're working with, do we ourselves have that? And how is that playing out right now in the world that we're coming to live in right now, this new normal that we're, you know, experiencing right now? How do we connect and get that love and belonging? And what do we do? And does anyone have any creative strategies that they're using right now to help their clients or for themselves to create, you know, that love and belonging? Any ideas? I know there's lots of people here. Okay, we don't have any creative ideas. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide then. So here's a big thing then. So a creative idea that I would suggest is really, and I don't know how creative this is. I mean, there's a lot of people who are doing like Zoom reunions and making sure they're connecting with people, and they're reaching out and calling people and interacting that way. I've seen a lot of people who are like, everybody's 6 feet apart in the backs of their cars and they're talking to each other in parking lots. I've seen a lot of those kind of things. But let's look in our homes too. So if smartphones and social media are the new drug of choice in homes, and we've already seen earlier that kids are saying, my parents spend a lot of time on their phones, or it's hard to get their attention. They're really distracted. So they need our eyes. They need our validation. And really putting down the phone is important. And you guys, I mean, come on, how many of us do family therapy? And the kids are like, yeah, I don't really see my parents a ton. I don't spend a lot of time. Like, do you talk about family dinner with them? Do you talk about, is this family having dinner together? Are they're in their homes, but they're doing all their things separately. So we've got the parents are working from home, the kids are doing school from home. Is there a time when they all come together and really connect? So really asking about that in those assessments when you're talking with families. And making sure, like, kids are saying, can we play a game together? Can we do something? It makes a huge difference. And we don't always assess for that. So there's a rise of smartphone use and social media, and then this depression that's happened. So anxiety and depression, as well as phone usage, have been increasing at the same rate. So is that just, you know, coincidence? I mean, anxiety has existed before Instagram, right? Like, Instagram and Facebook did not create all the anxiety that happens. But there is a lot of pressure for us to be responding to text, to make sure we make a social media presence, to like everybody else's stuff. And it starts to create this anxiety. And these people that are creating these platforms for us, you know, they know how to get us hooked. And they're doing that, and they've done that. So we have to be really aware of how to respond to that. So I do see somebody has, they've made some comments on the chat. So I'm gonna go through those really quick. So somebody said, thank goodness for animals and that sense of love and belonging. Yep, there is definitely a connection with animals. And if we've noticed over this quarantine period of time, more people have been getting animals. Like, the shelters have been emptying out of animals. Somebody said Marco Polo has helped. Family has done group movie watching with Netflix. And somebody said, perhaps we can encourage collaboration on projects with the kids over the internet so we can interact better in a way that there's no competition, which is a really good suggestion. It's really changing. Like, right now, we need the internet. We need all of these technologies to continue to function. I mean, look at us right now. We're doing a Zoom presentation all at different locations, and we need this to find a connection and to continue to get our CEUs even. So we need that. We just have to get really creative on how. So I like this idea. Let's collaborate. I've got a therapist friend who's cooking with his niece who's out of state, and they have cooking lessons over the computer. And so he cooks the item and she cooks the item in her kitchen, and he can stay connected with his niece, which I think is super, like, that is such a good way. I know that I can connect. I have an uncle that's in Australia, and we can connect so easily and for free over all these different social media sites. They're beneficial. We just have to be aware of what we're using them for. So if we look at Sean Parker, who's that Napster founder and like the former Facebook president, he's saying social media literally changes your relationship with society and with each other, because he knows. He put that, he's one of the people who's behind it and is saying, look guys, we're messing with you. We're creating things and behavioral things so that you continue to come and visit. We're changing things up, and we put different, like all the likes and all the different things, those are rewarding, and we want you to continue to come to those sites. So if you're just worried about showing off to everybody else, and you think that it's all about status and that your values driven by other people, you're less authentic. you're worried more about, okay, when I post this and if I put this picture up, are people going to like me more? But we're not worried about how authentic we're being. So we've got to look at how authentic can we be all the time too. Ooh, there's another good one. Somebody said, go camping with family and friends and don't have any phone service. Yeah, you've just got to do that, right? And someone else said, unfortunately, social media has created a fantasy world where we compare our blooper reel against other people's highlights reels. Absolutely. I have a friend and he was dating this woman and they were living together. And he said it was terrible. The relationship was going really poorly, but he would go on her Facebook page and be like, I think she really likes me. Everything she posts about me is so great. Can I date her Facebook profile rather than her? Because she's so positive and she says so many nice things about me. And in real life, that's not what she was doing at all. So we know people are performing on social media. This isn't real, authentic stuff. So Philip says, camping's amazing because you're in nature, which is healthy, but it's also you're also disconnected from electronics without any reception. And yeah, I mean, those are the things we need to focus on, asking people, hey, how are you finding your connection right now? What are you doing to fill that in? And we know that social cue development doesn't really happen over text, like understanding those social cues. So it's like this neurosynchronization during face-to-face dialogue doesn't exist when commuting back to back. So when we're standing back to back, that neurosynchronization doesn't happen. It's not happening over text. We know that. It's not happening over social media contacts. We need to have facial contact, we have to have facial connection, and we need to master those emotional and nonverbal cues. We need to do that face-to-face, and we need to have face-to-face experiences to do that. So we need to find those opportunities. So as people are saying, camping would be a great one. Getting out there, doing something different. But I think there's also a lot of responsibilities on families to really pay attention to how to develop that with their kids right now when school connections isn't really ideal. And Tammy's saying, add a mask when you're in person and you're in trouble too, even face to face. Absolutely. So the choice is, do we do mask therapy in the office because you're in the same room together? Or do you do teletherapy where you can see each other face to face and you're not in the same room? There's a lot of things to consider right now in this current, the current situation we're in. So, and all those like face to face and the neurosynchronization is important in developing empathy. And Forbes is even saying, they want companies to adopt empathy and perspective-taking principles. Harvard said that empathy is one of the key essential ingredients for leadership success, because we need to know how and understand how those people that we're leading experience us. We need to have a perspective. Otherwise, we're just saying, go do this and go do that, and we're not paying attention, and we're not going to find as much success. But all of this lack of connection is also impacting our empathy. So we find now teens are 40% lower in empathy levels than 3 decades ago. And narcissism has increased 58%. So it's really important to pay attention. So how we build empathy. So when you go through this slideshow in the future, if you want, you can take some of these questions. They're for assessment and discussion. It's just asking questions of clients. Do you sometimes try to understand your friends better by imagining how things look from their point of view? These are just really good questions for discussions. And we can then model being friendly, give our kids a voice, help them to develop that skill of face-to-face conversation, with their parents, and unplugging, as we've talked about here, is, you know, the camping, getting out there, going on hikes. I've seen a lot of people going on hikes more right now as well. They're just getting out there. And here are these habits of empathetic children. They have emotional literacy. So emotional literacy, we don't have like a school where we just learn all about emotions. We used to just learn that at home. And we don't have classes where we're just like, okay, what's the difference between anger, disappointment? What we know is sad, glad, and mad. We know those pretty well, right? And it's nice that they rhyme for us so we can remember sad, glad, mad. But let's really develop some emotional literacy. Let's really understand what all these different feelings mean. And Tammy just said, it's alarming how often teens tell each other they should kill themselves over social media or text. Yeah. I don't even know if they understand what they're saying sometimes. You know, and do they have a perspective at all? Do they understand? So when we look at these lists of empathetic children, you know, the habits, having a moral identity, understanding the difference between right and wrong. Do we have one when we're telling kids to go kill themselves over social media or texting them that? Have we developed an idea from their perspective? Do we have like any self-regulation skills? Do we know how to practice kindness? Can we collaborate with other people? Do we have the moral courage to stand up and say, that's not the right thing to do? And are we doing, so we know these, like, there's a ton of people out there that are out taking pictures. You know, you see people who are volunteering at a food bank and they're like, selfie with all the homeless people behind me, woo! I mean, come on. Is that altruistic? Is that developing any empathy? It's like, look, I'm a really great person. I'm so virtuous. I have all these great things, you know, because we're scared that people on the internet are going to be judging us for not being virtuous. But it's not because we're altruistic. It's because we're operating out of like this shame. So Brenda says, texting can also be negative because it's hard to understand the tone of what's being said. That's so true. We don't, and emoji doesn't, you know, doesn't always do that. I mean, I'll call people to be like, hey, can we move this around or can we do this? And they won't answer. And then I'll text them and they'll answer me right away. Like, the phone does work. That ringing sound means to pick it up and answer it. And it would be nice to have that conversation where you can hear that tone, even if you can't see the person, even if it's not on FaceTime. So it's really paying attention to all these different aspects of our relationships, right? And some people are like, well, I don't know how to be empathetic. I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing or do it the wrong way. Yeah, no, there's not a script. This is really listening. It's holding space. It's not judging somebody. It's emotionally connecting. And it's just saying to somebody, you're not alone. I'm sitting here with you. I know you fell in this hole and I'm in this hole with you because I wanted to let you know you're not alone. So let's just sit here. Let's just sit here together and feel that. And sometimes that's what we have to do, and it has to be uncomfortable. But it's recognizing, I see you, you know? I have a friend who's a firefighter, and I've known him for years, and he's been a firefighter for about 12 years now, firefighter paramedic. And as a therapist, especially one that's been in residential, you know, our like view of the world gets a little cynical. We see things and hear things that aren't super positive and don't give us a lot of hope about the world. And we all went to dinner together as couples, and he said something over dinner nobody really saw or heard, you know, and I looked over at him and I said, I see you. I see what that comment was. I know what's going on with you right now. He made this very like cynical statement, and I'm like, cynical much? And he's like, that's right. You see me, you know, you see through me. And just that connection. And it's funny because I was with him over the weekend and he said it again to me. He's like, I remember, and I try to change that because I know how I come across now because you pointed it out to me. So just knowing we're not alone and he's trying not to get into that place that's so negative. We want people want to know that we're like, that we see them and we recognize and we validate them. It's really, really important to our development as humans and as a society. And so then we look at our suicide rates. So I'm pretty sure you get suicide CEU credits for this because suicide's in the title, right, Michael? So let's look at our suicide rates. And I'm hearing right now, there's a lot of evidence out there like that people are talking about that's saying like our crisis line calls are increasing significantly. We're hearing a lot about those kind of things and suicide rates. There's a lot of anecdotal information coming out about it, but this information is pre-COVID and it's disturbing enough. And then we hear this other information. So we're looking in 2017, 47,173 Americans died by suicide. That is a ton of people, all preventative, you know? And it's the 10th leading cause of death in the US. And in Utah, the suicide rates jumped from 41% for ages 11 to 17, and we're the 5th highest in the nation for suicide. And some researchers say that there's 25 suicide attempts for every suicide death. So we need to really, like, why? We need to ask the question, why are people doing this? Is our world so unsafe? Do we feel so uncaring? I have a friend whose son completed suicide in the fall, and he's working through trying to understand why. And a lot of it was about feeling disconnected. Just feeling disconnected to the other people around him. And we look at threats can be a means of actually trying to reconnect with other people when they're feeling disconnected. So there's times, and maybe that's another reason that our crisis line calls have gone up. It's because there's this lack of connection. And so people are like, okay, we really need to, I need to connect with somebody. So I'm going to call this hotline. I'm going to get on the phone. I'm going to talk to somebody. A lot of times there's people who don't know how to verbalize. Again, we don't have that emotional literacy. And we don't know how to verbalize all our feelings all the time. And so sometimes we really are just saying, I just want to die. I just don't want to be here anymore because I want somebody to connect with me. I want somebody to recognize me and see me. And so it suggested this ideation to attempt framework, that we look at that ideation and attempted suicide as separate processes, and then look at their predictive factors on how ideation eventually leads someone to end his or her life, and why. So we're looking at, and I'm seeing that there's a comment as well, and I'll answer that too. But we're really looking at why is the ideation there, really going through that and like dissecting the reasons for that and how we can address that. And then looking at those predictive factors. So the Columbia does a really good job of that as well. Philip asks, is that the 5th highest numbers or percentage? I believe it's we're just 5th in the numbers, I believe in the country is how they do theirs. It's a national statistic. So if you look up, it'll say like numbers, Tammy's saying per capita. So yeah, because I think Alaska is also, I think Alaska's in the top 2. So it probably is per capita. So ideation to action framework. I don't know how many people are familiar with it, but it's a really interesting framework on suicidal ideation. And there's this 3-step theory. It suggests that the progression from ideation to attempt goes from, there's this ideation, it's the combination of pain and hopelessness. And then number 2 is that pain and hopelessness, we look at connectedness. So is there connectedness? So if we can have, like, we all experience pain and hopelessness. And then we get to step 2 and they're like, okay, I feel connected to other people. There's good things happening. And that becomes a key protective factor. But then when there's not that connectedness, we get to number 3 and we look at the capacity for suicide. So what do they have access to? What's their plan? Those kind of things. So it's a lot very similar to what we've always done as therapists in assessing suicide risk, but it's really looking at that belongingness. And then another theory also suggests burdensomeness, because people don't want to be burdens to others. And so we want to look at that burdensomeness, which is a really long word, and belongingness, right? And really start in our suicidal patients, start looking at that. What's their connection? Do they have hope? And when we look at like the key factors in what makes therapy successful or not, right? It's the relationship. 30% of therapy success is, can we build a relationship between the therapist and the client? 15% of that is hope. So when we start looking at these things and pulling all these different concepts together in the different research, for me, it continually comes back to connections. It comes back to like really fostering hope and relationships. And then we look at dehumanization. So if we go back, and for some reason I really like World War II stuff, I don't know why, I always just have. If we look at all of the different genocides, all of the different horrible things that happen, it starts with dehumanizing language. You look at World War II and the propaganda that started out about the Jewish Germans, right? We just start talking about them as less than human. And so humans don't tend to persecute those people and groups that they perceive as equal. So we start grouping people into all these different categories. And it's, oh, well, they're this religion. Oh, well, they're this color. They're this race. They're this ethnicity. They're from here. They speak this language. They believe these things. And we start to really categorize people so that we can persecute them, so that we can put ourselves above them. And it's really unhealthy. But you can see that all over the place. If you go on social, particularly right now, like how many noticed at the beginning of the pandemic, there was like all these commercials that were talking about, we're going to do this together. We've got this. And I'm like, that's a Band-Aid commercial. And they're like, yeah, we're going to all do this together. It's so exciting. And now you don't see that as much. The whole message has changed. And there's a lot of attacking that's happened. We don't sustain our ability to work together for very long. And even now it was, wear your mask, because that's us all working together and saving each other. And now you'll see people who are like, oh, you're wearing a mask, you're such a sheep. Or you're not wearing a mask, so you're just terrible and you hate people. I'm like, there's so much judgment that's happening, and we are really dehumanizing one another. And we have to pay attention, like each of us as individuals has to pay attention to that. So we're sitting here biologically connected, to find connections. Like biologically, we are made up to connect with each other. And yet we are just damaging and hurting one another on a regular basis. We are saying horrible things to one another. If you're a liberal, then you're evil. If you're a conservative, then you're evil. I'm like, who is that? Does that mean everybody's evil? How does this work? But we are just dehumanizing each other, left and right. And it's so sad. And so it's looking at what can we each do when you see that? I mean, I can get on to social media and start to look and just be heartbroken by the comments that people are saying to each other and the battles. And that's just in my own family. My aunts have been attacking each other over certain political viewpoints. And I watch that in the comments that are made to each other. This dehumanization process is killing us. It's destroying our society, and it's destroying our ability to be empathetic. And then if we're doing that online, are we also doing that in front of kids? Are we talking about, oh, well, Aunt Judy said blah, blah, blah. Well, Aunt, Susie said this, and she's terrible. We're just not going to talk to her ever again. And so then what does that teach our kids about relationships? What does that say? It says, if you say the wrong thing, you are done. We don't have to talk to you anymore. We're not going to be connected to you anymore. So we're being encouraged to yell at each other over screens, encouraged to call names. It's a very scary situation when we don't have empathy. So as I mentioned earlier, where's our education in emotional literacy? I think back to, like, I've compared this, like, remember learning about like the cotton gin and thinking, oh, that changed. Okay, so it's really important that I know about this cotton gin because the world changed because of that, right? And so, or the Industrial Revolution happened, or this and that happened. And then I think, oh, well, when did people start going to gyms? When did we bring in stationary bikes and like stair climbers and treadmills because people stopped walking in real life? We had to walk on machines. When did that all happen? Because at that point, we had to adjust as society, right? We had to create a gym because people weren't out, in the fields farming as much. They were going into factories. They were more sedentary in their jobs. This is the same thing with relating and connections and educating about emotional literacy. We learned emotional literacy in our families at the dinner table because we got together, because the neighbors would stop by and we'd spend hours together, because we wrote letters to one another and had to write down what we thought and how we were feeling. Those were the ways that we learned these relationship and connection skills. So what are we going to do to teach these things? How are we going to develop this emotional literacy? Because relationships, they're just left to happen right now. We're just hoping that people don't do too much damage to these relationships. But emojis are a big thing, and we put little smiley faces or hearts to each other. We do those things, but what are the words? Again, glad, sad, mad. There's a ton of other emotions. So as therapists, kind of falls to us a lot of times. So when we look at our emotional fitness, here's some little things to practice. How do we accept being vulnerable? Like really accept, and how do we become real, genuine people? I have a 10-year-old and she always wants to be right. That's like this big thing for her. She gets so embarrassed if she's not right. And I have to work with her all the time on, okay, you're not going to be right. You're the youngest kid. Your sisters know a little bit more than you do right now, and that's okay. It's all right, but she doesn't want to be vulnerable. That's really, really difficult for her. So we have to practice being vulnerable. We have to practice those connections. We have to practice this distress tolerance. Like, how do we sit with uncomfortable feelings? How do we sit with silence? Do we develop that empathy? Can we be mindful? Can we sit and just for a few minutes not engage in anything? Can we stand in a line without looking at our phones? Can we just look up and look around us for just a minute? How creative are we getting? So I don't know about you, but my kids take all of the cardboard out of the recycling trash can. Everything. The milk jugs, everything. I'm constantly finding like all the parts of my recycling are all over and they're like glued together or taped together. And it's crazy making. I'm like, stop. It's all my trash. I put it in the trash and now you guys are gluing it. And I have to keep reminding myself, this is how that creativity is fostered. Okay. take those huge cardboard, build a whole thing all over the backyard. That's great. Having free time where we're not super scheduled. And again, with the emotional literacy, I'll just keep saying emotional literacy. And then scheduling boredom. That gives us a chance to problem solve, you know, is to just have some bored times. So I put in here just a few different charts that can be used in therapy. I've had some therapists who really contributed to this. And so this is one. Look at all the different emotions listed on here and where they're connected to. So this is a tool that we can use. We're all familiar with the little faces. There's lots of different ones. And then here's this list of core emotions. So this isn't just sad. I mean, we've got sad, glad, mad on here. There's anger and sad is on here. And happy could be our glad, right? But then look at all the others. We've got anxious, belonging, blame, disappointed, embarrassed, gratitude, guilt, shame. You know, look at all of these different feelings that are on here and how the words that we can use to really understand this and develop that emotional literacy. And then we look at resiliency character traits. So emotional awareness, again, with this emotional literacy, we're understanding our feelings and why. We know we have support. We've been talking about that, right? We've got support. We know people who are around us, they're going to provide us with that validation. Then internal locus of control. So that belief that we can control our own lives. And sometimes we don't believe that when social media is telling us your value is whether or not you get likes. If your post gets a lot of likes, then you have value. So that takes away that internal locus of control. So that perseverance too, like, okay, I gotta keep moving forward. Well, sometimes we don't want to keep moving forward when we don't see that immediate reward right then and there. And so it's really figuring out, how are we going to develop that? And we go to optimism and that hope that we talked about earlier. And then a sense of humor, the ability to laugh at ourselves. And how do we laugh at ourselves? I mean, I can laugh at myself because I'm not a really shame-based person, and I say and do goofy things a lot of times, and sometimes I mess my words up and I can't pronounce things, you know, and I can laugh at myself, and I can be comfortable enough to know, okay, people might judge me for being kind of goofy and ridiculous sometimes, but that helps me be resilient. So we look at all of these things and go, okay, how do we build these in our clients? How do we assess for these traits in them? And how do we keep, you know, fostering this? So then we've got, you know, we all know our lawnmower parents that don't help with resiliency development, right? Anybody not met a lawnmower parent before? They like mow the lawn and push everything out of their way, make sure everything is really easy for them. I have a 16-year-old who, she wants me to read every text that she sends if it's a complicated situation. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Stop asking me about that. But she wants to make sure. I can't call the doctor and do that. So I have to push her to do the simplest social things because she just doesn't want to screw it up. So we have to push and not become really lawnmower parents. And then looking at shame isn't a good tool. I should put, actually, I thought about this. Shame is a terrible tool. Shame is not an effective tool. Shame does not change behaviors. You know, we could put all of that in. Shame is super problematic. But we still operate, like, how much shaming takes place when we get into dehumanization mode? That is all shame, you know, and there's parents who are like, well, if they don't understand that they really screwed up, then they're never going to learn. No, they just learned that they're really bad. That's all they learned, was that they were bad. And they're not learning from those situations. It's great to learn from our mistakes. I make mistakes every day that I have to learn from. But if you're going to shame me about it, I'm not going to learn. I'm just going to feel like, oh, I was really bad. Like I did something really, really bad. So we have to look at how shame is going to be eliminated and how we utilize appropriate guilt. Like I should feel bad when I rob the bank. You know, I should feel bad. That's okay. I really should. I should feel bad if I text my friend and say, go kill yourself. I should feel bad about that. That is okay. That is appropriate guilt. But that doesn't mean that I'm the worst person ever and that I'm not valuable and I have no use in this world and I should go kill myself. And that's what shame really teaches us. So we look at humility, we look at vulnerability, we look at authenticity, and those are the things that really help us grow. It's like, I just love this concept that strength isn't about pretending that we're not afraid. Strength really is saying, I am so scared, but I'm going to go out and do this anyway. I'm going to be like, I remember the first, Michael asked me to do this presentation a month or so ago, and I'm like, I don't really like doing Zoom. I like having human interaction. It was really uncomfortable. And I was like, all right, I'm just going to go and do it. I don't know if anybody's listening to me. I have no idea, but I'm just going to do it. And it was scary. But I grew because I identified that vulnerability. I accepted it. I got comfortable just being vulnerable, and I could grow. And if we just run from everything that's difficult, we're not going to grow. So, and I'm thinking we have just about 4 or 5 minutes here. So we all know that we ourselves come up with ways that we protect ourselves from feeling any hurt. You know that we all put our armor on. We've learned how to disappear in a room or to, you know, lash out at other people. We have all those protection skills, you know, we have those tools, but sometimes we need to take off the armor and we need to just show up and let ourselves be seen and embarrass ourselves or put ourselves out there. But we also know that we can't always take it off. As I'm talking to my friend, the firefighter paramedic, and I said, you know what? Sometimes you just have to be vulnerable about what you've experienced. Like, I get it, that car accident, you saw really heinous things this weekend. That was really hard. You might have to feel that at some point. And he says, I can't take that armor off. Cannot take that armor off when I'm at work or I put everybody else at risk. If I sit and experience that in that moment, if I'm mindful while I'm trying to, you know, cut a car door open to save someone's life, if I start thinking about the emotions of it, I'm not going to be effective. But at the same time, how long can you hold on to that? And it's this very delicate balancing act. And so sometimes we're asking kids to take off that armor in our offices, or we're asking adults to tell us things that are really difficult for them. And we have to honor that we're really providing a space for them to become vulnerable. And we have to help them sometimes still use some of that armor and that protection so that they can continue to function. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things that we do, because I want to be like, just be vulnerable and feel all this stuff and hopefully we can get you through it all. But no, we got to help them get some of that back on so that they can keep functioning, because it's so overwhelming. And thank you, Shelley, for saying that we're listening. I appreciate that. So solutions, right? What are our solutions right here? We need to acknowledge there's not just one solution. We've pointed out certain things like turn off the electronics, have some electronic free moments, you know, evaluate our resiliency factors. learn how to grow. I always say family dinners, you know, as my family has grown and my kids have grown, we tend to stand around our island eating, but I count that as family dinner. If we're all sitting there and we're looking at each other, even if we're not sitting at the table, like, but really look at what can we do as a family? What can we do to develop these connections? And look into each other's eyes when we're talking. Evaluate each of our own digital behaviors. And especially when we're in this period of time when everything really is digital. I don't know how many of you, I started doing teletherapy in the first couple weeks. Like my eyes were killing me. I had pounding headaches, and all these different therapists I was talking to were like, I am so emotionally exhausted. And it's not that there's something about the computer screen and the blue lights, and I got those blue blocking glasses and I did all of those kind of things. And I think my body adjusted, and I think it's harder to move in your chair when you're on, you know, a video chat and all those things. But evaluate your own digital behaviors. Make sure you're taking care of yourself when we're on the computer so much, and making sure we're taking time to unplug. And I didn't mention it, but families can create technology contracts. So it's really, that can include a lot of different things, like how long we're going to be on, when we're going to use phones, when we're not, those kind of things. And I believe so strongly in connections that I just throw in all these quotes about connections. But when connections are real, they never die. They can be buried, they can be ignored, they can be walked away from, but they're not really broken. And if we've deeply resonated with another person or place, that connection remains constant and there, regardless of the distance or the time. You know those people that you can't talk to for years, and then all of a sudden you get together and you just catch up instantly. That connection is present. And let's really foster those connections right now. Let's build them, and let's help our clients develop them. So, and you can read this on your own, but I just really loved it. But it's really like, we can, and I'm very big on self of the therapist, like really looking at and understanding and capturing our own experiences to have empathy for our clients, to figure out how we connect, not to use our experiences with them and go, oh, well, when I did this, but to really connect with how could they, and put ourselves in their shoes and develop that empathy. So really, it's standing with those people that are in pain. It's helping them take that armor off. It's making sure that when we see a breaking heart, that we can stand with them and let them know that they're not alone. And let's figure out how to stop dehumanizing each other and really start just empathizing with one another. And if we can do that, we can heal so many different people, and we can develop relationships that will also in turn heal ourselves. And it's just this incredible symbiotic relationship that can take place. So look at each other in the eye, support one another, and do good work. So thank you guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your comments. And the last page or two are just resources for you guys. So thanks for coming. Michael, what do you need them to know? The code?
Just trying to, yes, I'm just trying to get the code here and get on I want to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so I hope you see that there. There's the code. We're going to use Social 811. And if you registered for the class, I've got your email so I can send you the evaluation page. If you did not register for the class, I need you to email me or contact me, and I will send you the link for the evaluation, and you can fill it out. use that code there, and then we will get you your certificate for the state issues. So, so write that down if you've got a second. If not, oh, the other thing, if you can't write it down, if you're in the car right now, whatever link that you got for this Zoom, you can probably reply to that, and that should get back to me, and then I can send you the link for the evaluation. So again, if you registered for the class and did that, then I've got your email. If not, I need you to email me. So thank you for coming. If you need to leave, please feel free to do. If you'd like to ask a question, we've got a minute or two that we can answer any questions.
Michael, this is Jason. Can you hear me?
I can.
How can we get a copy of the
The PowerPoint?
PowerPoint? Thank you.
If you'll just do that evaluation, I'll send the certificate and the copies of the slides all together.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, I'll send out the slides. Yep. Okay. Thank you all. Have a fantastic day. We'll visit with you more.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.